Livestream. My name is Josh. I'm the VP of Growth at Electric Coin Company and your host. So we've made it to the end of the third quarter of a year that we'll never forget. A lot of people are going to tell you it's been a terrible year, but I disagree. And let me tell you why. We finally got to work from the comfort of our own home, allowing us to significantly cut spending on unnecessary clothing. And every day, we're surrounded by our loved ones in close quarters, never going out, just staying inside, just us and our loved ones together all the time. Day after day, after day, after day. We did get great new TV programming, and the entire world finally came together in unity for maybe the first time ever to create a new fashion trend. Oh, and the US announced it discovered UFOs. So there were one or two challenging things that have happened in 2020, of course, that we want to acknowledge. Among them, all kinds of things were canceled, including the Eurovision Song Contest. But we did get the movie Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga. But for me, the most anticipated event in 2020 is coming in November. The happening will occur. The Founders Reward will be gone. ECC and the Zcash Foundation will have a fresh set of funds to continue our work. And new people and companies will have access to a significant amount of grant money to build and support Zcash. By the way, congratulations to Hudson, Sarah, Chris, Holmes, and Sean for being selected by the community to form the new Major Grants Review Committee. They've been entrusted by the Zcash community with the establishment of this new entity, paving the way for the acceleration of new things being built with and on top of Zcash. And so for all of us Zcashers, we enter a new era for Zcash in mid-November. I don't anticipate that it will look much like the past. And it's the people on this call that will write the script. What do we believe? What do we stand for? And where will we take Zcash? So here's a preview of what we plan to share with you today. It includes foundational information about our mission and a peek at some of the work ECC is doing to see it realized. If you have questions, please go to Slido, sli.do, and enter the event code ECC Livestream. Again, ECC Livestream. Upvote questions you like or log your own, and we'll take as many as we can at the conclusion of the stream. You can continue to post questions as you go through, or as we go through the live stream today. And again, we'll take them at the end. But before we get started, in case you missed it, for 13 weeks leading up to the activation of Canopy, ECC is celebrating the community with a series of announcements, events, and giveaways. And between you and me, we have a big announcement coming next week, so stay tuned. Yes, I am announcing an announcement, but it's so huge, and I really want to tell you about it today, but I can't. So please keep your eyes open next week. We're also launching a new contest this live stream. So if you're watching live, you get a head start to win a Zcash poster or series of posters, your choice, by answering a trivia question about Zcash. Email your answer to info@electriccoin.co, info@electriccoin.co, and the first 3 correct responses will win their choice of posters, and we'll contact winners early next week. So here's the question. Zcash was launched on October 28th of 2016. But the 4-year halvening won't occur until 2 to 3 weeks after its 4th birthday in mid-November of 2020. Why is that? So there are a number of factors that impact that date, but we're looking for the most significant one. So again, you can email your answer to info@electriccoin.co. We're also making this poster and other swag available for purchase on Teespring. There's some links up there, check it out. We aren't making any profit, we're just charging our cost and having it direct shipped. Okay, so let's get to the meat of the live stream. I'd like to now introduce Zuko, who's going to share more about our mission. Zuko.
Hello. Hi, I'm Zuko. Thank you all for listening. So, when I was 15 years old in 1989, I picked up a newspaper because we didn't have the internet back then, and I saw that the Berlin Wall had suddenly toppled. It suddenly become a place of celebration instead of a place of death. And this was shocking to me. And it meant a lot. It said to me, national borders are dissolving and are ceasing to be jail cell walls for people. And it was shocking to everyone else too. No one expected it. And shortly thereafter, during my formative years, I discovered the internet and I was able to send email to anyone who had the internet. And again, I was blown away. I said to myself, wow, this means for the first time ever, national borders are no longer control points for communication between people. Anyone can talk to anyone. And then shortly thereafter, I discovered cryptography, public key encryption and digital cash and mixed nets and all kinds of stuff. And again, I was just starry-eyed about it. I said, this is the third piece, the last piece that we need. And national borders will cease to be barriers to cooperation between people. And then that one didn't happen, right? Now we are 25 years later, and what have we got? This is a picture of the South Bronx in New York. It's like a stone's throw from the gleaming towers of Manhattan. And 50% of the people here don't even have a way, they don't have a way to get a loan. They don't even have a way to efficiently cash their paychecks without spending their time and money to do so. And this is what we got instead of what I imagined. We got PayPal. It's not global. It censors and surveils everything that everyone does through it. They'll investigate you or freeze your money or just disable your account for arbitrary reasons with no recourse. They'll, if you send notes through their subsidiary Venmo, they'll block and investigate you if you say words like Cubano or Persian, but not if you say words like bomb or Ku Klux Klan, because they're controlled by their political and public relations needs. And if you fall outside of that, they're not going to be available to you. And as we just recently heard a couple days, like 2 weeks ago, they will now investigate any account who mentions the word tardigrade, which, as we all know, is the secret true mascot of Zcash. But that's not even the worst of it. Here's a picture of people standing in line because they woke up one day and their prime minister had declared that 85% of all the physical banknotes in the country were no longer real money, no longer valid. And this is a country, this is India, where the vast majority of these people had no other way to get paid or to buy what they needed. This is a picture of people. Next here is a picture of people in Venezuela where these economic actions by their government, ostensibly to help prop up a struggling economy, has actually devastated them. Through no fault of their own, almost everyone in this entire country lives in desperation, starvation, murder, and the political elites that made these moves ostensibly to protect them are expropriating billions of dollars while these people starve. This is one of the headquarters of the government of China's project to replace the yuan for billions of people with a fully digital version, which, if it goes through, which is totally plausible, it's practical, well, it might be, but their goal and potentially their effect is to give a level of visibility and insight, but also a level of control that's truly unprecedented in history. No central power has ever had this fine-grained ability, both to monitor, but also to control the behavior of people. And I want to say simply, governments and surveillance capitalism megacorporations cannot be trusted with this much power over this many people. And that's why 4 years ago now, we announced that we were going to create Zcash. And in the initial blog post that we wrote, we said why, and it was a very simple reason. And it wasn't privacy per se, it was openness. We said, this is a technology that no one can be excluded from, and no one can be prevented from extending it. And we got this amazing ragtag group of cypherpunks and scientists together. I remember, so back then I had the ability to I had the time to read all the science papers. And I loved these science papers that some of these scientists had been writing. I thought it was a really powerful, promising new invention. And I remember how excited I was when Matt Green, one of these scientists, contacted me and said, we want to see some of this actually productionized and actually made available to people, and we'd like you to lead that. And I told him no. In that first phone call, I said, it's awesome. I love your work. It's valuable. People need it. But I said, privacy is just kind of like a minor, like it's especially necessary for some people, but it's not necessary for most people. And so it would only be a niche product, and those people really need it and they should have it, but it's not going to do enough good for the whole world for me to devote the rest of my life to it if it's just going to be a niche product. And then I slept on it and I called Matt back because I thought about it and I thought, actually, privacy is necessary for everything. Every business needs privacy to operate its business. Every society has privacy. Every functional, successful, long-lived society has privacy as one of its core prerequisites. And so this new thing, this could actually be the mainstream solution that everyone relies on all the time. And that's why I decided to focus on it and why all these people came with us and joined in on this. And I want to take 1 minute. We've got a lot of awesome announcements that I want to get to, but I want to point out something that we wrote at the time on the 0th birthday of Zcash. When the blockchain first launched, we posted this blog post pinned by me and the other tiny team that existed back then. And I want to point out why the reason we said we're doing this hasn't changed. We said the reason we're pouring our lives into this and the reason so many other people have stepped forward to join us is that we believe this technology holds the possibility to empower billions of people. We said with years more of evolution and hard work, this can enable anyone, anywhere to cooperate, share resources, help each other, and construct more efficient and more humane social organizations. So now here we are, 4 years later, with the biggest network upgrade ever, Canopy, and we've done some major technology improvements and usability improvements, but this is the most important network upgrade because this is the Zcash community taking the baton from our hands, and they've decided to allocate a whole bunch of capital, at least tens of millions of dollars of capital, without our permission or including us in most of it. In fact, specifically excluding us from most of it, but that's okay. But they've taken control, and so far they appear to be operating with exceptional like good judgment and accountability about the use of this. And that's what Canopy is. It's a turning point in the irrevocable decentralization of Zcash. It's both, to me, this is the biggest competitive advantage of Zcash is that it's both self-governing and self-funding. And if something isn't self-funding, then it's vulnerable to capture. So this is the most important development ever. All right, look, we've come a long way. We've deployed breakthrough technology that is now universally acknowledged in all the laboratories and research departments and governments of the world to be a powerful and viable technology. And that's because we deployed it 4 years ago when no one else would have been capable or willing to try that. But we've got a long way to go. There's billions and billions of people who have no access to fair and open money. They're controlled, they're denied. And it's daunting, right? It's ambitious to say we're going, as a community, as a network, we're going to change that. But I remember before that newspaper came out that day, everyone, literally everyone, thought the Soviet Union was too big and too powerful and too greedy for power that it could never change. And it changed fast, changed overnight. No one saw it coming. Things can change fast. And what we're offering people is the ability to help each other and to improve their own lot in life. And that's even more powerful than these governments and mega corporations. So we just now launched our new website. Check it out. It makes explicit our reason, our motive, why we're here and what we're doing. So you can opt in to whether this is something you are willing to support and spread. And this is the way I think about it. Why we're doing here is to empower people with economic freedom. That's that simple. And in order for it to be that, it needs some things. The way we do it is through technology, but it's not technology for its own sake. It's technology that enables people to help each other. It's the people helping each other that's the real source of the power. The technology is just to make that possible. And for anything like this to satisfy this goal, it needs some qualities. It needs to be there. You're not doing anybody any good if you tell them in another country, if you had different resources or next year. So the availability and the reach and the ease of access is a critical component. And second, it has to make them free. It has to be an alternative that when they opt into it, they're opting out of being under someone else's power. Censorship and surveillance are an epidemic that they only gain the power to do what they're doing over the last 20 years. It was never before possible. And this is the part that's the battle, because for two reasons. One is that a lot of well-meaning people incorrectly think that censorship and surveillance are protective of society and good for safety and prosperity. And that's a mistake on their part, but it makes this an uphill battle that so many people don't understand that. But the other is the beneficiaries of the censorship and surveillance. It's not beneficial to society, but it's very beneficial to a few people, the incumbents, and they don't want people to have an alternative. And so we're never going to compromise on this, because being uncompromising on this is the path to success, and because it's the right thing to do. And the third quality that we have to have in order to succeed is to evolve. We don't know everything. We're going to change we're going to learn new things. Everyone's going to learn new things. People's needs are going to change. And the competition is not standing still. They're racing. They're racing to get there first. So for anything to satisfy this mission, it has to evolve. And the steps that we take within ECC, which is what you're about to hear, there's basically 5 categories. The first 2 are demand generation and adoption. And that means the first one means letting people know that it exists, why it matters, what it is, why they would want it. And the second one is making it available to them, which we do by in third parties, by exchanges, wallets, businesses, apps built on Zcash, community like fan clubs, underground activist networks. That's all third parties that we support, and we do a lot of that. The middle category is regulatory. We spend so much time educating not the despots, but the well-governed, well-intentioned regulators to teach them what this technology actually is, what it does and doesn't do, and to counteract media-driven sensationalism and misinformation. And the last two, engineering and R&D, that's our asymmetric advantage. We've already multiple times done things that were never possible before technologically and made them available to people. And we have even more such tools coming up, more opportunities. So these are the 5 categories of what ECC does. And I'm about to turn it over to Stephen, our Director of Engineering, to let you know about what we're up to. Stephen.
Okay, thank you, Zuko. It's really great to always, I love hearing that story. You sometimes as an engineer, you get caught up in technology and what's the technology today and what can you do tomorrow, but it's always important to remind yourself of the mission and why you're doing it in the first place. And I think the Zcash community does that incredibly well. So I've been here for about a year and incredibly proud to be a part of that mission. Before we get into the actual flight plan that we typically talk about in these live streams, you've heard a bit about our 5th network upgrade called Canopy. I want to mention briefly our 4th network upgrade called Heartwood, which activated mid-July of this year. You'll hear more in a moment about a few of the things in there, but it was an incredibly successful upgrade or activation, one of the most successful arguably that we've had. We had over 80% of the mining hash power had upgraded confirmed prior to the activation timeline. Kind of went off without a hitch. No bugs in Zcash D, no consensus issues. We had one ecosystem partner that had an issue. We worked with him, identified it down to kind of a build issue in his environment, but we took care of that and helped him out. So yeah, just wanted to touch on that briefly before we get to the flight plan, and we'll kind of move on to that. So to just kind of frame the flight plan, we talk about 3 different time horizons in the flight plan. Near term, 0 to 6 months. Midterm, we call it 6 to 24 months, and then longer term, 2 years to 4 years. And we loosely aggregate those timeframes around different focuses. Initially, it's community enablement and interoperability, which is kind of where we're at right now. The next midterm horizon is under a new governance structure. As everyone is aware, the new dev fund starts with Canopy activation, November 18th. And then longer term, we're looking at layer 1 scalability and what we call a closed loop. And I'll talk more about that in a moment as we get going. With that, we'll just kind of hop right in. So what we'll talk about on the next few slides, everything's kind of organized in a table. I'll give you a little bit of background on that quickly. We talk about the goal, like what do we want to achieve, the rationale, why are we doing this, and then activity this quarter. So we'll talk about things, that we're going to do in the 2 to 4 year range, but the activities we talk about are just the things we're doing this quarter to reach that goal. The first 2 on the list, Fly Client Support and Shielded Coinbase, were included in the Heartwood network upgrade. Fly Client, we've talked about before. It is essentially enabling light clients, whether that be a mobile phone or whether it be a client on another blockchain for cross-chain interop type integrations. Shielded Coinbase in particular allows the Coinbase reward to go to a shielded address as opposed to previously enforced by consensus, a transparent address. That incentivizes miners to shield directly to sapling. I'm happy to report one of our partners, Luxor, great partner for us and the ecosystem, mined the first shielded Coinbase transaction in mid-August. And another shout out to Luxor. They did a great job helping us rewrite our mining guide to kind of bring it up to date. So we really appreciate their involvement, and it's just kind of indicative of what we see in the ecosystem. We do have other mining pools we're working with to implement shielded Coinbase as well. Next item, viewing key RPC support. That essentially allows you to selectively disclose information about your shielded transactions to regulatory and compliance related entities like exchanges, for example. We added that support in release 2.12, and we're working with partners right now to roll out their implementation of viewing keys. Next item up is what we call testnet in a box, which is essentially a containerized deployment of a testnet that allows you to spin up your own multi-node testnet. Activities this quarter, we're in a pilot with Bolt to leverage that in support of the work we're doing with TZEs, which you'll hear about in just a sec. But we did that as a key enabler for other protocol teams getting involved with Zcash. The foundation's about to come online with a new consensus node, and we hope to see other protocol teams doing work post NU5, post Canopy, when the major grants comes into effect. Transparent Zcash extensions, as the name implies, is a way to extend consensus rules somewhat programmatically. It allows for things like payment channels and cross-chain atomic swaps with the blockchains. Activities this quarter, we've delivered that implementation to Bolt, who is again piloting it for us. We've added TZE support transaction builder as well to facilitate testing and development. On the wallet side, we've done a number of things. We continue to enhance our SDKs, iOS and Android. We open sourced the ECC reference wallet implementations for iOS and Android back in June. And we're proud to say there's already third-party applications built using that code. The Nighthawk wallet in particular has launched. I believe at this point they're Android only, but they are in the Google Play Store, I believe. So that's exactly why we built those applications, was one, to consume our own SDKs and APIs to ensure that they met the needs of the community, and to facilitate development by other teams in the wallet ecosystem. Okay, moving out to the next horizon, again, under new governance structure, the Dev Fund. Primary activity for us is to implement the Dev Fund decision. So we completed the Dev Fund ZIP implementations, had an external audit on those by NCC, and we deployed that code in release 4.0.0, which set the mainnet activation height for NU5 for a Canopy. Under Halo 2, you'll hear a good bit more about this in a few moments, so I won't spend much time here. But Halo 2 is, zero knowledge proofs with a recursive proof composition. We would love to see that as a standard throughout the crypto ecosystem. Scalability 2021 is our longer term layer 1 horizontal scalability initiative. Halo 2 is a part of that, but we have other horizontal scaling methodologies we're working on in conjunction with Halo 2. Community-driven protocol development. So we do a number of things at ECC. Some of those are in engineering, which is what I'm talking about, but then some are outside. The growth team, Josh's team, et cetera. And we're trying to foster a broader protocol development ecosystem. That really begins in earnest with major grants in the Dev Fund era. So we're doing something right now. We're working to define a more agile network upgrade pipeline, or NUP as it's called, which is kind of the process loosely that we followed to do network upgrades in the past. We want to make it more agile, more understandable, more flexible where it can be. But the important thing is we want to retain the safeguards that we've put in place that have given us several successful and safe network upgrades in the past. And I think we can accomplish that. We're working with the foundation and the community right now to define that more agile process, and looking forward to seeing what that looks like in the end. Along those same lines, we've been investing in enhancing the Zcash documentation. We had a really great doc set to start with, but we've added a number of videos to the documentation, reorganized it a bit to make it easier to find the information that you need faster. We've been through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure it's up to date. We encourage the community, if you see anything that's not clear or could be better organized, to reach out to us and let us know. On the Halo 2 side, Again, we're going to talk more about that in a moment, so I won't dig into it here. But we continue to work on Halo 2 and look at its inclusion in a future network upgrade. When we move out to Horizon 3, again, just for clarification, the further out we go, the less well-defined plans are and the more likely they are to change. But two really big initiatives, one, Scalability 2021, which is again part of Halo 2, but also layer 1 horizontal scaling methodologies that we've been evaluating for some time to see how we might do that. And the second item is kind of that closed loop. It's extending privacy across different bridging protocols so that you extend the value of the anonymity set to other blockchains, for example. One of the items we're doing this quarter is some early R&D around shielded Zcash extensions, which would enable things like shielded boat channel management. So, all right. Just a couple of quick items to call your attention to. We're obviously September 24th. The next item for us is release 410, which will come out mid-October. And then, of course, Canopy activates, as we've said several times, November 18th, roughly. At this point, it'll change by a few hours, but it's roughly going to be on the 18th. The key thing to point out here, I just wanted to call your attention, we put out releases on roughly a 16-week cadence, and we do network upgrades roughly twice a year on a 6-month cadence. If you kind of look ahead a bit post-Canopy, I know that's a big focus for right now, of course, but we're looking at 6 months from Canopy would be NU5, which would be roughly May 18th to activate on mainnet. And 3 months prior to that, which is roughly when we'd activate on testnet to allow for adequate partner testing and ecosystem adoption. So yeah, so that was the kind of the key things there. So now we want to get into Halo 2. And I've just got a couple of intro slides. Then I'm going to turn it over to Sean Bowe, who's going to do an incredible job giving you some of the details on Halo 2. To call your attention, Zuko mentioned we have a brand new website. It looks great, by the way. You should definitely check it out. But one of the great resources for information about Zcash and ECC and some of the things we're doing is our blog. So it's electriccoin.co/blog. Just to call your attention to some things we've put out recently regarding Halo 2. We put out an announcement that we're open sourcing the code under a license called TGPPL. We put out a technical explainer for Halo 2, and we also put out an introduction to TGPPL for those that might not be familiar with it. I mentioned briefly the Ethereum Foundation grant, and we're incredibly excited about this. We've been working with the Ethereum Foundation informally for years, predating my tenure at ECC. And it's just incredibly rewarding to be able to work with other ecosystem partners, not just ECC, but other blockchains as well. It's a very welcoming ecosystem in general, I found. But the grant is kind of formalizing a previously, informal relationship. It's quote for scientific advances in productionization of Halo Zero Knowledge Proofs Phase 1. The key there is we're in exploratory phase on this. We're doing research. We're working with some of their cryptographers on key concepts and ideas that are going into Halo 2. And we'll be looking at opportunities for other grants with Ethereum going forward, as well as expanding who we're working with as we work to standardize Halo 2 throughout the crypto ecosystem. That's what we'd love to see. So before we hop in with the details on Halo 2, and Sean provides that, I just wanted to say that ECC is fully committed to productionizing Halo 2 with the goal of eliminating trusted setup. We realize that this process is going to be a long one, and it requires a lot of attention to detail. It requires peer review, a lot of engineering, third-party security audits, and testing. One reason that we feel like we'll be successful with that is that's how we've always done things. We've been through some major network upgrades. They've always come out safe, sound, and we've always come out the other side with a great enhancement and upgrade to Zcash. We've got that track record, and we know it involves working with the community and the entire ecosystem. We've open sourced Halo. We're working with the Ethereum Foundation, and collaboration is really key to success in this type of effort. As I mentioned, we are fully committed to productionizing Halo 2 with the goal of, one, setting ourselves up for layer 1 scalability, but the real key is eliminating trusted setup as early as 2021. And with that, I will pass it over to Sean, who's going to give you some of the details around Halo 2. So thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, so we're really excited to share some details about Halo 2, mostly benchmarks. These are preliminary benchmarks, so it's a caveat. These numbers might change a little bit, but we're in the right ballpark, and I think that this is mostly what it's going to look like performance-wise. So as a preview, let's look first at how proofs are integrated, zero-knowledge proofs are integrated into sapling transactions. So we have these spend descriptions and output descriptions and shielded transactions. And each one of these objects contains a zero-knowledge proof, specifically GROT16 proof. And GROT16 is kind of a tall order to compete with when it comes to performance because it's one of the most efficient cryptographic primitives probably ever devised. It's smaller than 200 bytes in size. The verification time is 7 to 10 milliseconds, maybe even faster with some optimizations that we haven't really done yet. Of course, you can batch verify these things. And the proving time is really, really good too. So most people don't really think that you can take a protocol like sapling and compete with this performance because this is so good without either requiring a trusted setup or having gigantic proofs or having really expensive verification time. And we're going to shatter that myth because after working very hard to optimize and come up with new ideas, we have managed to actually find something that's very competitive. So to begin, this is sort of just a very naive sense in which how Halo 2 could be integrated into Zcash. So the proof's not that much bigger, 1.5 kilobytes. The verification time, 30 milliseconds. And something important to note about this verification time is that it's completely parallelizable. So unlike with GROT16, where proofs can only be checked with a bunch of serial operations that run on a single thread, the verification here you can scale it to however many threads up until what you run into memory contention on your machine. So really just a few threads and suddenly now you're checking proofs just as quickly as GROT16, which is really, really great. And I'll share some details of how we accomplish that in a moment. The proving time is actually much better for GROT16 or compared to GROT16 proofs. Probably it's at least comparable, but probably closer to twice as fast. So like I said, this is sort of the naive way that we would integrate Halo 2 into Zcash, but there's actually a much cleaner and more efficient way to do it. It turns out you can create the proofs all at the same time. So in a fully shielded transaction, you might have 4 or something like that. You create them at the same time and they share the bulk of the computation required to create the proof, the bulk of the computation, or almost all of the computation needed to verify the proof, and most of the size of the proof can be shared amongst all the proofs that are in the transaction. So the marginal size is actually closer to an actual GROT16 proof. The marginal verification time is so negligible, it's not even worth mentioning. It's not even a millisecond, probably much less than that. And the proving time is even better than just in the naive case, where maybe we get a 2x speed up. The marginal proving time is closer to like 100 milliseconds or something like that. So really good performance. So like I said, performance-wise, the Halo 2 prover is going to be faster than the current prover. The verifier isn't much slower, and in some cases, it's even faster or comparable with the existing GROT16 proofs, which is pretty amazing considering GROT16 relies on a trusted setup and pairings and so on. So we're within striking distance of that, and I don't think it introduces a new scaling bottleneck or anything like that. The transactions would be bigger, but in the grand scheme of things, it wouldn't be. We have this, 1 kilobyte blob that sits in the middle of the transaction, but memo fields are already like 0.5 kilobyte. You might have a couple of those in a shielded transaction. So we're not talking about a huge increase in transaction size either. So how did we do this? Well, we threw every idea we knew about and that have come out, either things from Halo or things from Plonk and other recent discoveries in the last year or so. We threw everything at the problem, and one of the major contributors to the performance improvements is this hash function that we've internally been calling Sensimilla, which is essentially, it maps to a Peterson hash. So it's very similar to the existing Peterson hash that we use in Sapling, except that it's 20 times more efficient. We can use this for the Merkle tree, and this is mostly responsible for the increase in performance that allows us to catch up with Grok 16. So performance, we have it in the bag. There's no problem. Halo 2 doesn't require a trusted setup. This is great. And there's this kind of side note with that, is that we don't have to ship or bundle these gigantic parameter files to our users. The parameters are generated locally by the client, so it's a lot nicer. Doesn't require pairings, just requires traditional looking elliptic curves. Of course, I'm not really personally too worried about pairings, but it is sort of a moving security target, and it's nice to be more conservative on assumptions. And it's a stepping stone to scalability. This is the reason why we created Halo in the first place. It supports these techniques that Grok 16, like proofs, have no hope of supporting in our current system. It supports accumulation strategies and aggregation strategies that allow us to address various different scaling bottlenecks that come out while we're trying to design a scalable version of Zcash. So very important stepping stone in that direction. So with that, I will hand it over to DC.
Hey, thanks, Sean. And so, folks, before we dive into my piece here on tokenomics, I want to share a brief anecdote about the origin story of Halo. So we at ECC knew that Sean had been working nights, weekends, holidays, really burning the candle at both ends for a long time to try to crack this nut of creating breakthrough cryptography, something that nobody thought was possible. And I remember vividly the day that Sean grabbed Zuko, Josh, Swihart, and myself and said, "Hey guys, I need to meet." And we met in person at Galvanize in Boulder and watched in awe as Sean gave a tour de force of whiteboard cryptography, explaining to us what he had discovered. And I remember vividly thinking at the moment, this is history happening and unfolding right before my eyes. So I'm really, really pleased to see what Sean has been able to accomplish. I know that other members of the team have played an integral part in helping him get this innovation to where it is today. But couldn't be happier to see something go from a possibility into an idea and now potentially into something that we might ship in Zcash at some point down the track. Very exciting. So I want to talk for a moment about tokenomics, which is really the intersection of economics and token supply. Next slide, please. Something that's very important for any crypto investor to be thinking about is, does this token have a fixed supply? How are these tokens created and how are they distributed over time? So Bitcoin really is sort of the gold standard. It was the first, created in 2008, went live in 2009. It has a fixed supply of 21 million tokens that are issued over time to folks that provide a role in securing the network. The Zcash project, as Zuko shared earlier, was launched in 2016 and took the supply curve straight from Bitcoin. We thought that model worked and we wanted to emulate it. Now, notably, the US dollar does not have a supply cap. How many US dollars are in circulation? Nobody really knows. But as we're looking forward towards wanting sound money, I think it's very important to understand how much will exist over time. Now, when we talk about issuance, we talk about circulating supply. This chart shows the circulating supply of Bitcoin. And what we see is that there are presently 18.5 million Bitcoins in circulation. And we see that the slope of this line changed meaningfully in May of this year. And that was the halvening event, of which Bitcoin now has had several. When these halvening events occur, the issuance rate of new tokens into the circulating supply decreases by 50%. And this is baked into the protocol. Next slide, please. And when you look at the circulating supply of Zcash, we see that to date, it has been a straight line. There are presently 10.1 million Zcash in circulation. And the very first happening is set to occur here in November as part of the fourth network activation. And what this means is that the rate of new Zcash tokens being released into the wild will be cut in half. So if we look right now at the rate of Bitcoin inflation, it's just shy of 2%, so a fairly low rate of new tokens being created. Compare that to the present rate of Zcash inflation, which is 26%. So Zcash is highly inflationary, and there are a lot of people that believe that that high inflation rate, which is part of the protocol, it's the same curve that Bitcoin followed, but a lot of people believe that that is responsible for downward pressure on the price of Zcash. After the halving, the Zcash inflation rate will go down to 13%. This chart here shows you a look at some projects that I track and that I'm interested in. And key things to look at are, is the supply capped? What is the maximum supply? And what is the current inflation rate? So Cello's new kid on the block, which explains why their inflation rate is so high. Zcash here, the rate is listed at 15%. I mentioned just a moment ago, it's 26%. But this is a forward-looking 12-month view, which includes 2 months of the 26% inflation and then 10 months of the 13% inflation, bring us that 15% average. So a lot of people believe that these halvening events have positive impacts on price. And I don't have a crystal ball. I don't want to make a case for that. But I do think that this 4-year birthday is an important milestone for our project. And I do believe that reducing the inflation rate to bring the inflation rate of Zcash closer in line to that of other top-notch projects will be positive for the community and for the project as a whole. So in the course of the MGRC discussions, which were really great, it was very, very exciting to see the community come together and elect 5 fantastic people to serve on that inaugural committee and make a decision about where 8% of Zcash issuance will go over the next 4 years. It's a big deal. But what I saw was a lot of folks have very polarizing opinions about VCs or venture capitalists. And my personal opinion on this is that folks that hate VCs just haven't yet had the opportunity to work with a good one. Well, what defines a good VC? I've been working in technology now for long enough that I'm now participating in the 3rd wave of Web 1, Web 2, and now Web 3. And I've been able to see that there are a number of principles that define success across all 3 of those waves. And I'll tell you this, that folks that happen to get involved in Bitcoin early and buy low or mine low and sell high, that does not qualify them to run a venture fund. And I think we've seen that in a lot of sort of flash in the pan crypto funds. Placeholder, by contrast, has DNA that comes from Union Square Ventures, which is a New York-based VC that was foundational in creating the internet as we know it today. But what the partners at USV who came to Placeholder and teamed up with Chris Berniski, who was a Bitcoin guy early, what they found and what they state in their thesis is that there is too much centralization of data, wealth, and power in the hands of too few people. And that this is not the world that we want to create. This is not the way in which they will return value to their limited partners. So the Placeholder folks have successfully, the people that founded Placeholder were successful in building the internet. And like it or not, the internet transformed civilization, it transformed culture. We now have an opportunity with Web 3 to correct things that we did wrong with Web 2. And therefore, I'm very pleased to see a firm like Placeholder that has DNA that spans the previous generation of internet entrepreneurship and combines that with great brain power from Web 3. I'm very pleased to see them backing Zcash. So the Placeholder team recently published their thesis on their Zcash position. And what I was really pleased to see when reading this thesis is that they correctly understand the importance of privacy as we create this financial revolution. It's absolutely imperative as we create a new paradigm for finance that participants in that system have the same level of confidentiality that they experience today in the legacy financial market that they will going forward. This is absolutely essential, and Placeholder gets that. They also appreciate that privacy is not something that you can bolt on. It's something that you need to build in, and that attempts to bolt it on later will likely create gaps and cracks that will ultimately be exploited. The slide here shows that protecting privacy is fundamentally important, particularly when you're not sure about which way the wind is blowing from a geopolitical perspective. They say here, if 2020 has taught us anything, it's how fast society can hurtle towards dystopian outcomes. And for those of us paying attention to what's been happening in Hong Kong, what's been happening in Belarus, and even what's happening here in the US around the forthcoming election, it's fundamentally important that we have a technological mechanism in place that allows for the free exchange of ideas and prevents censorship. And so that is what we're working on here at the ECC. That is what Zcash is all about. And we are very pleased to have Placeholder as partners with us on that journey. The Placeholder team also, I think, correctly puts the right amount of value on the ECC team. The ECC team has, I think, a collective 200 years of software engineering and cryptography experience. So the problems that we're solving here, these are not easy problems. These are not problems that anybody can solve. And I think our team is uniquely positioned to do that. And we're very pleased that the community has leaned in with ZIP 1014, with the new dev fund, with the creation of MGRC, the additional funding flowing to the Zcash Foundation to really double down on this mission and give us the resources we need to execute successfully on it going forward. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Josh, who's going to bring us home.
Great. Thank you, DC. And for everybody on the call, thank you for spending some time with us. As a reminder, before we get to Q&A, keep your eyes and ears open for events and announcements over the next few weeks. I think you'll be very pleased with some of the things that are forthcoming. And again, I'm pretty excited about that. So now we want to respond to questions that have been coming in through the live stream. I'm going to start feeding those now. You can still go to Slido, sli.do, and enter ECC live stream and add your question and vote up the ones that are there. All right, so let's start with this first one. This is going to be for you, Sean. When you say share proofs, does that require an NPC for participants, or will the block generator be combining the proofs non-interactively?
So when I say sharing cost or the proofs are being created the same, I'm not talking about an NPC. When you create a shielded transaction in Zcash today, you create the individual Grot16 proofs separately, completely separately. But in a protocol that's like Halo 2, the proofs can be constructed at the same time in such a way that they actually share the cost of creating the proofs. And also in such a way that they share the verification time as well, and much of the proof size as well. So that's mostly what I'm talking about. Now Halo 2 does support techniques that allow you to do these accumulation strategies and aggregation strategies as well at like a block layer level, but that's not what I'm referring to here. I'm just referring to individual transactions.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So my understanding, which is I think what you just said, is in Zcash, like currently with a normal shielded transaction, it involves multiple proofs most of the time because there are multiple notes and there's sometimes multiple recipients. And that's what you were talking about in your slides.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Absolutely.
So those performance properties can already be applied to normal old like transactions that you send from your wallet today. But in addition, there might be other ways to combine other kinds of proofs to make even more performance improvements.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, Sean, I'm gonna ask you another one since we've got you on. So the question was, if this new hash is used in Grot16, won't Grot16 be better than Halo 2?
So the new hash function actually can't be efficiently expressed in Grot16. It requires new infrastructure. Now, it's definitely possible to create a proving system that's more efficient than Grot16 for the purposes of sapling in some cases, but that's not really our goal. Our goal is to be as efficient as the existing system without requiring a trusted setup. And that's what we've accomplished that for the most part.
Yeah, thank you. So this question I'm going to ask to you, DC. It says, how will ECC be engaging with the MGRC? And I know you posted something out on the forum, but share a little bit about how you think that might work.
Sure. So for context, the Major Grants Review Committee is newly elected by the community, consists of 5 members. That panel will be responsible for making decisions about how to direct those funds. And it's material. It's the largest slice of the dev fund. So the question is, how will the ECC be liaising with the MGRC? And that's really TBD, and it depends on how the MGRC wants to work with ECC. In my forum post congratulating the winners of that election, I offered to serve as that liaison. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of those candidates, both previously and as part of my candidacy. And I'd be delighted to serve as that point person with them to whatever extent they find helpful. I think sharing with MGRC in greater detail what ECC priorities are, and specifically what things we're not able to prioritize, so they can fill in those gaps, may be helpful to them. But again, it's really up to them. They can decide how they want to leverage me in that capacity.
Thanks, DC. So there's a question that came in about our relationship with the Ethereum Foundation. It says, what is the relationship between ECC and the ETH Foundation? Will they be continuously funding ECC? Stephen, you've been working with them quite a bit. Can you answer this question?
Yes, be glad to. So what we have right now in place is a single grant for a certain amount, covering specific deliverables of some milestones we've identified. We're also in talks with them about a subsequent grant and have been for some time, but the content of that grant and what we specifically do under that grant is largely determined by some of the output of phase 1. So it's not a continuous grant like in perpetuity, but we do have the opportunity for follow-on grants as well.
Thank you. This next question, it says, will funding outside parties be like the Ethereum Foundation?
I'm happy to answer that, Josh.
Okay.
I think, again, the question is the largest slice of the dev fund is going to MGRC. The MGRC has a mandate to use those funds to nurture and encourage third-party development in and around the Zcash protocol. Will it be like the Ethereum Foundation? I don't know. I don't have a lot of insight into how the Ethereum Foundation operates. I do know that Hudson Jameson he's a member of the Ethereum Foundation and also a member of the Zcash MGRC. So I imagine that he will be able to bring some of the best things that are happening in the Ethereum Foundation world to that MGRC. I do know that in the course of the MGRC conversations, there were many candidates that expressed a desire for MGRC to do not just grants, but also prizes and bounties. So Chris Berniski in particular has had the experience of being involved in governance and in grant programs at multiple projects. And his experience in those projects was that using these alternate mechanisms like bounties and prizes can be far more effective than only doing grants. So again, how this is going to happen on MGRC is entirely up to MGRC. But I would personally be very excited to see them take an approach that combines grant writing with prizes and bounties.
Great, thanks, DC. Sean, we've got a follow-up question for you. The question is, so to clarify, this proof combining is done on a transaction level. So is it for the case when one person wants to create a proof of multiple spends?
Yeah, so in Sapling today, when you create a shielded transaction, you'll spend one or more of your, or fully shielded transaction, you'll spend one or more of your shielded notes. And then you'll also have, so each one of those spend descriptions has a proof associated with it. And then you'll have one or more recipients, including potentially a change, usually a Sapling change recipient address. And so in that case, you're creating 3 proofs, and sometimes you might be creating more than that. So it is all shared at a transaction level. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, another good question. These are really great questions. Thank you for submitting them. There's a question that came in and said, how can people give their feedback and influence the future features of Zcash? Stephen, what's the answer to that one?
It's a great question. And it's an exciting question because we love to have the ecosystem and community involved. We love feedback on what we're doing, and we love feedback in general, future plans for Zcash. There's a number of venues to get plugged in. One is obviously the forums. You can reach out to any member of the community or ECC or ZF there. We also have the Zcash. If you already have kind of a project or something, Zcash Gardening Club is a great place to showcase that. And if it's a protocol level type enhancement that you'd like to see, then we also have the Zcash Arborist calls where we specifically discuss protocol features. You can reach out to me specifically. We can get that topic. We kind of schedule those topics ahead of time. So you can reach out to me. We can get the topic on the agenda, talk through it. You know, we can talk to it, or if you have input, if someone has inputs, then they could present as well. It's an open call, kind of an open dev call, kind of like the Ethereum Foundation runs as well. Yeah, so any of those mechanisms would be perfect for giving this feedback and influence in future direction of Zcash.
All right, so DC, we have a question for you. You've been riding this DeFi wave, so will Zcash ride the DeFi wave? And if so, what is the roadmap for getting there?
Thanks, Josh. So as you mentioned, I've been riding the DeFi wave here for some time, been a long-time supporter of Ethereum, and I'm very interested in finding ways to put my crypto to work. I don't trade. I like to buy and hold, but I also like to earn yield on my holdings. So I'm constantly looking for a way to basically put my money to work for me. And what I see right now in DeFi is quite interesting. And I'm very excited to see multiple bridges being created between Bitcoin and Ethereum, and also between Zcash and Ethereum. So the first production bridge between Zcash and Ethereum was brought to the world by the Ren project using the Ren VM. And I've tested this extensively. I've been spending time with the Ren team, and it works. Right now, there is a significant amount of Ren BTC that has been minted on the Ethereum blockchain. So I think it's fantastic. I love, and I put a high priority on teams that have actually shipped something. That said, there are some open questions that folks have asked about decentralization and security related to the Ren project. And I believe that the Ren team will answer those over time. But these are real concerns that I think are legitimate and need to be addressed. Another bridge just went live yesterday, I believe, or the day before. The Thesis team and the Keep network have created a production mainnet bridge between Bitcoin and Ethereum called TBTC. And very, very excited to see this go live. Matt Longo has been a friend of the Zcash community for some time. And we here at ECC are looking forward to the day when that team brings that capability to bridging Zcash and Ethereum. So as it relates to interoperability, we have at ECC, we've been long on that for a long time. And we think that interoperable blockchains are very important. Now, looking at DeFi specifically, we've seen a craze around yield farming, incentivized liquidity providers. I see this with quite a bit of skepticism. It seems to me to be at risk of being a bubble. I have concern that these incentives and these governance tokens that are being airdropped on liquidity providers may then later be dumped on unknowing retail investors. So caveat emptor, be careful out there. Don't play with money you can't afford to lose. And bubbles are not why we're here. Our project, our mission, our orientation is about creating long-term value and creating economic freedom and empowerment for everybody, not making a quick buck near term by riding bubbles. Now, that said, I do believe that Zcash is sound money. We talked about that fixed 21 million supply cap. We talked about the slow issuance over time. And I believe that Zcash makes excellent collateral. And I believe that Zcash can be used as collateral and it can be used effectively to lower the cost of capital for small business owners around the world. So that is the future of DeFi that I would like to see develop. And I think we're on the right track. We have what it takes to get there, but it's not going to happen overnight.
So no Zcash yield farming just yet.
You know, it's interesting. So the Ren team is doing an incentivized pool with Ren BTC. I would like to see that happen with RenZec soon. But again, I think the long game that we're shooting for here is to fundamentally lower the cost of capital for folks, particularly in emerging markets, not to allow already wealthy speculators stateside to earn a quick buck and leave retail bag holders, paying for that.
I love that answer. Thank you. So I'm going to take one more question. We did get a comment in there that says, keep up the good work. So greatly appreciate the encouragement too. If you've got other feedback, please, DM us on Twitter or grab us in the forum or whatever. We love the feedback, both good and bad. So this last question I'll take, it's how will the MGRC grants be different than the Zcash Foundation grants? And ultimately, both of those entities need to answer those questions. I think the idea is that historically, the foundation has funded smaller efforts. The idea with the MGRC, in speaking as a community member, is that the expectation is there'll be larger grants, maybe for more kind of bigger players to enter the ecosystem. But I'm hoping that the MGRC soon will kind of come forward with whatever rubric or whatever kind of criteria that they have and the kinds of things that they anticipate funding in the future. So we're pretty excited to see what they come up with. So that's gonna wrap us up for the live stream for Q3 2020. Again, stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the support, and we will talk to you soon. Love and peace.